luckily made it on a bus yesterday, and we're really glad to be with you all. I have two things to say. First of all, we are like K-12 teachers. Actually, we've spent the last few years teaching in elementary schools. So if the conversation is feeling like we're talking to third graders, please just like, go like this, or like say like raise the level. It's been a while since we were in graduate school. And then the second thing is like we do have some things we want to share, but we also just want this to be conversational. We know that like we're not the experts on this necessarily, and that we have some ideas, but we want this to feel like if you object to something, like object, make this can become a conversation, a discussion around the ideas that we present, and we hope that we can all add something to the idea of global education today. So I'm Zach.
I'm Leah.
And we're teachers first and foremost. We have taught in public schools in America, in charter schools in America, both of us, and then we've also taught in international schools. And our background is that we both started teaching with Teach for America, and that was an interesting segue into the rest of our teaching career, because then we taught in international schools. And so we both taught in Arizona, actually, in public schools there during the SB 1070 days, if you follow the news. So it was a pretty difficult time for the immigrant populations that were there because of the laws surrounding them. We watched our students go through just some really tough challenges from the government, as well as just life circumstance challenges. And what we noticed is that, working in a struggling school, working with a lower income population, that students need to see possibility. No matter where you are, you need experiences to be able to break out of a circumstance, or to be able to move beyond your community. And so we noticed in our smaller communities that it was important for them to go on field trips, that it was really important for them to have pen pals across the world, that it was really important for us to talk about college, and that getting these ideas and opportunities didn't just come from nowhere. Like, if you only walk in 4 blocks for 15 years, most likely you're not dreaming about college, most likely you're not dreaming about traveling, and therefore you're not accessing those experiences that I know I had when I went to museums as a child or traveled to Italy as a middle schooler. And so anyway, so then we moved, both of us actually went to Tanzania, and we both taught in an international school. And in my international school, as we have at this table, we had 13 different countries represented in my 4th grade classroom. And I was able to take this No Child Left Behind classroom and put it into context from an international perspective, and see that, okay, so we have 13 different countries represented. That means experiences from one country, from we had Poland, we had China, we had America. We have experiences everywhere, and then suddenly we're all talking about an issue, and the level of conversation spirals up so quickly because they have experiences and they can share with them, and then that just develops a certain level of critical thinking around issues that I had never seen before. And so I'm just like, all right, so how do I get this to my students in America? We're thinking like, how do we give this to our students? Like, this is great education. We're being sold that a great education is getting a high test score, but a great education is not getting a high test score. A great education is exactly what's in front of us, which is that kids from across the world are sharing their experiences and are able to, because of that, because it's exciting and it's socially relevant, and it's and because obviously kids are social, we were able to see that this is what more kids should have. And so we started to just think about this while we were in Tanzania, and we developed United Classrooms. We're going to share that with you guys today. United Classrooms, just very briefly, and we're going to go much deeper into it, is a platform that was launched in August with support of Teach for America, Teach for All, the Earth Institute at Columbia University, which is where I went to school. And it connects classrooms across the world through a social networking theme. We're going to talk about some things that we noticed. We're going to jump into what global education is, and then we're going to share a little bit about how you can, I'm not sure how many of you guys are actually teaching right now? Cool. How many of you guys are teaching in a K-12 setting right now? Okay, cool.
How many will be teaching in a K-12 setting?
Cool. How many will you affect K-12 settings? All right.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. All right, so this is just, I'm going to stand up.
Because you're
Yeah. All right. So I'm just gonna. Do you mind managing that? So I'm going to just tell you about. I'm just gonna read this to you. This is a conclusion that we've come to through our between us 10 years of teaching now. Students grow up in a world where global and technological competencies will determine their access to jobs and social capital as adults, but do not have enough authentic and naturally engaging opportunities to practice the skills and mindsets necessary to succeed in these realms. And so that is a basis of what we're doing.
So we're not the only ones thinking about this. This is our esteemed leader, Ban Ki-moon, who is also thinking about global education in his recent Education First initiative. He stated that global education and global citizenship was one of his top 3 priorities. He wants to promote peace, mutual respect, and environmental care through those awarenesses, and it's cool to think that that's the agenda of so many people in this room as well. So we're entering a really wide dialogue by opening this discussion today.
And I don't think Ban Ki-moon's ideas about global citizenship necessarily move beyond like the United Nations and then right into American school systems. I think making that segue is like a really challenging thing to do, especially in the current educational environment. So we're just gonna ask you a question today. In today's increasingly interconnected world, are we preparing students to become happy, informed global citizens? And then I just want to know, in your experiences, in your master's degree setting, if you've student taught before, if you've been in an American classroom or in another classroom, I'm just curious about in this country, are we preparing our students? Do you guys have any experiences to share?
Or around the world? I mean, you've seen into the classroom, into global classrooms. Yeah. What have you seen?
I think in Finland, yes, it's in the national core curriculum because as Finland known one of the best education systems in the world. But then they think teaching just only Finnish, English, Swedish, whatever is not enough, because also they led 2 school shoots in 2005, 2007 and 2001. Young person came and killed everyone in the classroom in 2007, and it was followed in another high school 2008. So they start to think what are we doing? We teach perfect math, we teach perfect science, but what's happening in our classrooms? So it's in the national core curriculum, and they're trying to teach them responsibility, ethics, and also global citizenship and responsibility. So Finland is already a welfare state, but what Finland can do, cooperate, not compete with other countries. But coming back to Europe, now I've been working in a research project past few years in European Union, and especially my focus has been Germany. It's so Eurocentric, and then just teaching how Germany is the center of Europe, center of the world, and how European citizenship is wonderful. And then my research results, really scary. And then I've started with inequality, why some students in Germany are behind of, I don't know what is, it's in the literature native Germans, but I don't know who's native German actually. And then really it's not teaching them just German so they can speak better or do better on PISA results, but research results show these vulnerable young people really need citizenship education, really need civic education before teaching them. And then it's very obvious in the data, if they learn these skills properly, they will learn immediately German, they will get better math results. So now I came back to discuss again what I have studied in my master courses, that global citizenship and etc. So that's what I can say from Europe.
Does anyone have anything to add from their experience? I mean, I know, Amanda, you were mentioning before, culture almost should be the foundation of any language education. I think it's just along the same line.
I just want to share something else. I think there's one program in China that's very popular nowadays. It's the Model United Nations Conference. So I participated in the first national conference when I was a high school student. So they have high school students play the role of diplomats from different countries and then address the most urgent issues in education, environment, or something like that. I mean, it's really hard. The first year I was there, I was a diplomat from Turkey, and they asked us to talk about the water resources issue. But it's really fascinating because you need to put yourself into a different culture. You need to study their culture and then think from their perspective. And then it turns out that after this 5-day workshop and 3 months of preparation, I know more about their culture and also I know more about my culture. I think this is very exciting. They have used high school students engage in political dialogues and raise this awareness of global issues. I mean, at this time, English language only a media. So what they want us to is to express our opinions and know the world around you. I think it's pretty cool, but it's not open to all universities. Now it extends to university. University, they hold their university like Model United Nations conference.
Yeah, we're interested actually in working with them to help connect model UNs through United Classrooms. Does anybody else have anything to share? I'm just curious about like anything about the American education system that you can.
So, have you guys ever heard of Reach the World?
No.
Okay, so it's a nonprofit based in New York, and when I lived there, so they go into the schools there, and the kids can follow travelers who are traveling around the world, and the travelers create blogs for the kids, and they can interact with them somewhat. So I did an internship where I led these projects and things, and it was really fun. I did it on the Lower East Side. But one of the issues that we dealt with the whole time was test preparation. They were constantly pushing me back because they said, we don't have time, we have a math test coming up, you know, or we have like a spelling test or English test. You know, it was everything was wrapped around standardized testing. So though the kids loved it, they learned how to research, they learned about other countries, they just, you know, completely expanded their minds. It didn't matter.
So
I just want to say that resonates so deeply, standing in my 3rd grade classroom, being the founder of a global tool and having administration constantly remind me that language and skills are not a medium, they are the end. And I think that we're all kind of saying the same thing, and that it's about being a person and being a person who has expanded sense of possibility, but the education system in America right now is looking directly at this mastery of skills and not application.
And I think that's true across a lot of contexts internationally. And I think, you know, the movement towards numbers, you know, you can decide where you stand on that, but I think we can ask the question, like, can you in the current educational environment, like, also teach students to become global citizens? And I think that's a question that we also have to grapple with. So let's. Oh yeah, do you want to talk about that?
I guess I would throw in there that I think the concept of global citizen actually is much more about fundamentals of humanity than it is about necessarily trying to create this big ultimate cultural picture. It's more about recognizing how you affect people around you very locally, and not always about trying to imagine yourself in a new place, trying to be a part of that culture. It's much more about taking local awareness and applying it from a fundamental standpoint.
I would like to add something. From my experience from Europe, well, global citizen is something that maybe people is talking about, you know? People have been talking about this for ages now. The point is, nobody's doing anything. And then to add to what he's saying, somebody think like I put, you know, a lot of kids from different countries or people from different countries in the same environment and see how they, this is another way to talk about what you actually do is what is really important. What do you actually do with these people, and how you can push them inside to be a global citizen in the sense of not be global in the sense, okay, I'm talking with a Chinese friend or with a French friend. That doesn't matter. It's who are you and what you're doing with these people that matter.
Right. Yeah. I think what's interesting about like what both of you are saying is that like I think that we definitely have a relationship, you know, maybe issue with like all of us, like, you know, in front of our like iPhones or iPads all the time. We might, you know, are we looking at the person next to us, right, on a local level? Are we actually like caring about like, you know, these interpersonal relationships? But then I think we also do have to multitask, because what we do now, and we have the technology and hopefully the education and like the news to be able to like see what's going on, and we know that like what we do does affect, you know, people across the world. Like we have to like open our eyes and have that perspective so that we can make decisions knowing that it doesn't just affect me and that it doesn't just affect the person next to me, but it affects people across the world, our decisions, even our vote, right? Those things affect. Yeah, go ahead.
And so I just wanted to add, so I'm from El Paso, Texas, it's a border town. Having time in Arizona, you have a sense of like what the sort of frontera culture, you know, his border culture is like.
Yeah.
And I think for me, one of the key discrepancies that I saw in terms of seeing both the administrative perspective about how to respond to that versus, I think, the more sort of innovative and really sincere teacher perspective was in the case study of I guess, the Leah Independent School District, which we had the superintendent who was, supposedly like praised for creating this standard where, okay, by the time everyone graduates, they're going to have bilingual capabilities, and this is considered ambitious, right? But of course, most of them are already bilingual, so I thought it was like kind of a joke.
Right.
I had a friend though, and this is also in the Lower Valley, less resourced area in my city, where there was a school called the Leah It was actually trilingual, and it was an elementary school from kindergarten to 6th grade, where they actually, and as you were describing, I think, they had the culture incorporated. So if you were taking Japanese, you were also learning karate. If you were, learning Russian, I guess you're also studying ballet.
Yeah.
Like different corporate elements. But the expectation was you're learning these 3 languages throughout this elementary school process, was creating that foundation for that intercultural understanding early on. And I think in just responding to like the immigrant issues, for me, I was just confused and just like befuddled as to like why this was not seen as more of an opportunity for expanding that opportunities for immigrants in our country, as even just teachers' aides and creating pipelines for having that opportunity to have them incorporated, and seen as an asset in our country, as opposed to something that's just like, there's not enough jobs, and it's like, how do we get this perspective where we're so xenophobic and Americentric that, immigrants is a liability, right? This is thing that most countries would be like sorry for, especially when it's because of the chance to provide opportunities. Just with lack of creativity, we haven't created new platforms and interfaces for them to do so.
Right.
So sorry, I know that was a lot, but one quick thing that I wanted to, I don't know, I think hopefully get a sense from each of you, because I think as we're mentioning in terms of trying to create a greater global connectedness, I sometimes am very curious from other teachers, what is the sort of end for that? Like, what is the philosophy of education that people have, or what do they feel it should be? And I think that end is also very important, because when we look at the metrics, I think it's just really the problem with the metrics and the constant like standardized testing issues is because we've consistently put the cart before the horse, and that was never the intentional end. It was just how do we measure the progress we're making within schools, and how do we make sure that there's certain standards in place. And when we look at things like HMON, which my first time to experience it was as like one of the organizers at Harvard for the HMON conference, the Harvard Model UN conference. And for me, it was just like breathtaking in terms of the way that it could be formatted as an educational system. But when you come up against the problem of, well, how do you create metrics for this to measure progress and establish standards? I mean, I think it's a joke, right? Like, well, once you have someone who can basically meet all of these things, they're not gonna have a problem with your standardized tests, right? But at the same time, you still have to like have those standards in place. I think it's something that I sincerely consider, and that's a big part of my own ambition, is how do we create this on a much more accessible platform throughout the world. Because it was a really amazing program, and it was just fascinating in terms of what global education could look like.
Yeah, and like, why are we looking at education as like some sort of finish line? I know, like when I was, in my school in like small town New Hampshire, like no one ever was like, oh, I'm gonna push you down this finish line because you need to know exactly this in this box and this framework. And like, the kids who were, like you said, taking dance classes in relationship with their language are probably like really excited about learning and are probably going to go home and practice their language and actually become invested. And I think that's authentic learning and like relevant learning is what we're going to get to today. I think we should just move on just a little bit, if that's all right, just so we can dive in a little bit further.
So you all understand this, obviously, by what you've said, but this is the classroom, right? It has 4 walls and it has 2 directions for communication. And this is where our students are being prepared to enter the world in this environment. Teacher talks, student responds. We're stuck in this little box. This is the world that we're preparing our students for, which has a much more diverse and dynamic pattern of communication. The walls, hopefully, are lifted off our sense of possibility, and students are expected to gain the skill sets in this space to master this space. So let's talk a little bit more about those walls. You all may be very familiar with them already. We have this kid in the snow globe. Unfortunately, our students have limited encounters with the real world. Why am I learning these things? Who am I, and how do I apply what it is that I'm I'm learning from my teacher and my fellow students. We have scripted curriculum, which is impossible to make relevant for every child, which really stifles the creativity of the adults and students involved in this learning community, but which is considered, you know, worth our money and time in the elementary school setting. Then we have teacher-centered instruction. Most teachers, you can be really creative and innovative, but because of what you're supposed to feed your students, there's a lot of blah, blah, blah coming from the teachers so that we can get that test objective mastered. And unfortunately, more dynamic learning opportunities are often pushed to the side. And then finally, perhaps the one that drives and holds up all those other walls are multiple choice assessments. So how we're measuring success is really limited, and therefore we are kind of strapped to these other walls to succeed in that way.
Just wondering who draws this picture.
Who do you think? Who do you think?
That's why I teach 3rd grade, because that's what's going on in here.
So our thesis, so to speak, for today is that an excellent education is preparing students for the world that they live in. And we want to have you think about this just for a second. An excellent education is preparing students for the world that they live in. So we just want to quickly talk about some characteristics of the world that K-12 students live in. K-12 meaning just like primary and secondary students across the world. What is the world that our students are growing up in? Compared maybe to the world 100 years ago or the world 20 years ago. What is this world? Can we come up with some adjectives, some descriptors, some characteristics? Does anybody want to like just kind of share it? It's kind of elementary, but we just
I'll say the test prep for college entrance.
Test prep.
Test prep.
Okay. So you think that test prep is like more rigorous, or?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of the #1 region that they need to stay and study because of the test. So once they get the higher score, they can get into the good level of university, so they can be prepared for the better job.
Okay, so the education system is putting test prep at the center. Maybe you want to put that. What about like the world they're actually going to like move into as adults? Like what is this world? Like is it static? Is it mostly local? Like what are we looking at that's different than maybe like
Interconnected?
Yeah, interconnected.
Online.
Online. Yeah. What does that mean?
Like everything's going online. You got virtual world, Second Life, and then you got all those mobile applications, you know. And then I think more kids, which will spend more percentage of their time on screen, computer, cell phones, TVs, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Discipline.
So a discipline, yeah.
Are we lacking, or are we over? Like, what's the? How would you describe that discipline?
As you say, students are required to follow the instruction, and creativity means nothing in this environment, especially in Japan.
So I'm curious to make the distinction between like the classroom and the world that surrounds the classroom.
Yeah.
I think there might be some confusion. Like for me, I was thinking the exact opposite. As like discipline, I think it's chaotic and unstructured, and I think that's a huge dichotomy between the classroom and the actual experience.
Can we actually make two lists?
It's useful to make that distinction.
So it would be I think Sook's and Tom and Tom's maybe go into like what the education system.
Yeah.
What's a characteristic of the current K-12 education system, and then the other list is more like what is the world looking like for adults and for kids when they step out of their school system. Sorry if we were a little bit, we should be better at giving instructions for teachers. This is what we do all the time.
So this is an interesting comparison. Like we have what's going on in the school and what's going on outside of the school. So let's focus on list B.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I would also like maybe interdependencies, like for example now US is going to elect, but everybody's wondering in the world what's going to happen in the world, what's going to happen in the US. So like we cannot just say everybody is like closed and then living in their own small world, but we're all interconnected and interdependent to each other.
And that's also true of Americans too. I think more and more like we think we are no longer just isolated and can make decisions on our own. The elected officials in other countries influence us more than ever. I would say.
Right. go not against this, but I think loneliness of the students actually is pretty high. Because with all these online things, all connected, interconnected, but in reality they stay much more by themselves.
So maybe digitally interconnected, but individually still disconnected at times, oftentimes?
I would also say competitive. Perhaps in both of them with the focus on testing, but you know, once they're done, you got to compete for jobs and getting into college and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Do you think it tends to be more competition heavy or collaborative necessary? Because like you have to compete for jobs, but usually it has to be like, are you a good in teams? Have you done a lot of teamwork before? What sort of roles have you demonstrated leadership, right?
Good
So
point.
I feel like there is a competitive element, but I think from my experience in K-12, there wasn't enough collaborative elements that really helped prepare me for some of what you end up actually competing in, right?
Yeah.
Or getting placed for.
Yeah, I actually was going to go to medical school, and you know, something that now I just look back and laugh at is now that I'm kind of in this like business world, I'm in a competitive environment, and I decided not to obviously go down that path and become a doctor, but that I'm not sure all the time that like competitive environments are preparing like doctors that can look me in the eye and like give me a type of care that goes beyond just like the skill. And I think that like I see that in the business world as well. If you just like are not looking me in the eye and are if you're unable to work well with others, maybe you can do well on your own, but like the world is not like a cell. It's not insular. You need to be able to get along to make connections and get investments and whatever else. So.
And without character in global education, I know that my students, in order to keep them, from jumping around and making too much noise, I'm supposed to keep them at their desk looking at one piece of paper. So we're lacking that leader and relationship education opportunity within the model of the classroom that makes you less of a cell learner and more of a world learner.
So I think from here, I think this differentiation is like really, really important. Thanks, Keith, for helping us out with it a little bit. I think that like we have to remember that like this is actually shaping our world a bit, and I would include like where is that like loneliness.
Oh,
I think like that is starting to shape our world. We have to think. Do we want that? Do we want those things? Do we want those consequences of like an insular education system to shape our world, or do we want our world to become more like the things that it's becoming, I think, in the adult world, which is more collaborative, which is more interconnected? And of course there are some parts of this, like obviously you need skills, obviously you need to, you need your math and science to be a good doctor, obviously you need those things, but on the other hand, like this is actually what we are preparing our students for. So I want to just go back here and we say an excellent education is preparing students for the world that they live in. If this is the world that they live in, and if we really are becoming a more globalized world where we are more interconnected and we are also more interdependent, then global education, we'd like to claim, is actually essential. And yet, it's not an essential element of classrooms today. Maybe it is in some curricula across the world. Maybe it is in like high-class private schools in New York City. Maybe it is in like a couple very diverse settings in Boston. It certainly wasn't when I was growing up in a homogeneous place in New Hampshire. I'm sure, I don't know what it's like in El Paso, but I'm sure that it didn't feel that way. I know that wasn't the case. My students were all Mexican immigrants in Phoenix, and even there we had one Chinese teacher teach for America, and every day he was called Jackie Chan because of course. No, really, because of course, for them, that's all they knew. They had media projected stereotypes of diversity, and therefore they weren't really getting a global education. The only like diversity they really saw was in their textbook or in their guess what basal readers are? In their basal readers, which had some painted just colors of the world, which is not authentic experience with others.
So I asked my students what they needed to learn in order to change the world. And they said, I want to learn cursive, I want to learn to write and read. I want to learn to read more smooth. I want to learn science. I want to learn to get better at my spelling. And I applaud them. We will work on all these things, and I will make sure that they get better at their spelling. But I had to push and push, and this was all that they could come up with in terms of what they needed to be able to change the world. And I realized they didn't really understand what that meant to change the world. So these skills and the bridge that makes them applicable to this conversation about global education, as you said, is an age-old conversation. But how it's being inserted into the lives of our young people there's a huge disconnect. And I see it, like you see it in the handwriting of third graders who have been in the education system since kindergarten. So there's a big intervention that needs to happen.
And having traveled abroad, lived abroad, knowing from my own personal experience, I think that's something more than, I know that there are plenty of studies that would back this up, but we know that students need like real experiences. They need to go to other countries. They need to have like real friendships and interactions, like in person, on a community level, go to museums, actually like experience with all senses what's going on. But we do have actually from our insular models with, all the budget cuts and everything that is happening, we actually do have technology in our classrooms in America. And I think this is something to really pay attention to, is that basically every single student has access to the internet in their classrooms in America. And yet, in a 2010 study, you can see that how often are students corresponding with others on the internet. It's like about 30%. Sometimes they're often using online discussion boards or for student discussion. It's a little over 10%. And then how many are actually using the internet for like a social networking event? In elementary school, it's 6%. We can generalize this for high school. It moves up just a little bit for each. Go ahead.
Can you just clarify what the online board for student discussion, what you mean by that?
So it would be, do you just mean like put it in context? I mean, I think
what's an example? I have no idea what kids would do.
So it'd be like something like, have you heard of Edmodo? There are like these like, it would be like, maybe like Leah, Miss Schrader poses a question and students are going online and like posting.
So it really is an interactive space for students and teachers, or students and students, specifically for students.
Sure, and I'll admit that I didn't read enough of the language of the students to know exactly what the definition for this was, but I would imagine that that's what they're referring to.
Okay.
But it's like little kid what is it called? Discussion board, Blackboard. Little kid Blackboard.
Okay.
It's out there. But it's limited to teacher to student connection.
So we're not proposing that like the only way that you can create global citizens is by using technology, but we will say that we do have technology and that we should use it to the benefit of our students to develop global citizenship in our classrooms, so that students get to know students who they wouldn't otherwise be able to interact with, come into contact with perspectives that they wouldn't otherwise be able to see and understand. And so we have developed United Classrooms. This is a picture of the home page, and it's UClass, colloquially. We all hang out and, with the students all day long in our classrooms. And it's really exciting to be with our students, but isn't it exciting when they're excited to learn? And one thing that we've seen is that students love to meet other students. When, even in my class in Phoenix, we did pen pals like across the neighborhood, and that was the most exciting part of their day, of course, because they get to meet new kids. Kids are social, and social learning is beneficial. There is no doubt about it. In collaborative environments, kids perform way better than in, two-way communication flows. So we've created United Classrooms. That whole premise is this. A teacher signs their class up for a profile page. Their class has a profile page. On their class profile page, teachers can announce homework. Teachers can post discussion questions like an online board. Students can interact with each other. Everyone is messaging. But every classroom profile page in grade level buckets are actually connected. So students can go to other classroom profile pages and see these other students and can interact with them across the world. And that is the premise of United Classrooms. We're going to actually take you on the site afterwards. You can ask questions about it if you're interested. But just to give you a little perspective, we launched in August with a contained network, mostly of Teach for America and Teach for All. If you've heard of it, it's an international adaptation of Teach for America. And we now have 4,000 users in 30 plus countries, and it's totally free. And teachers just have to take the initiative to sign up and start using it. And we'll share a little bit of the exciting things that global education can do for students on United Classrooms.
So on United Classrooms, you can build diverse relationships, which we know is a component of global education. These are my students. I took them to the grocery store to practice adding. And the really exciting thing about this is that they went on this trip, but then we documented it, they wrote about it, and kids from around the world commented on it. So it left our classroom walls. You can see that there are kids from several countries and other states that went on and talked and asked questions of my students about their experience. And from there, my students were able to communicate with their pen pal classroom with which we have a sustainable relationship, and also other kids who were just interested in what they were learning. And suddenly the walls were blown off their experience, and they were realizing that their experience affected other kids and that they could talk about their learning in an authentic way.
But this is not just like an advertisement for United Classrooms. I mean, this is our lens into it. But these qualities are ones that we say are developing global citizenship. So another one is developing global perspective. We ask a global current event question every week on United Classrooms. If you guys have any, you can send them our way, because we're trying to we're trying to promote global citizenship. And so this was the question that was asked. The movie was recently released in the United States that has sparked violent protests in the Middle East and around the world. Do you think that people should have the right to say what they want, even if it's upsetting to others, and why? Is this cut off? Maybe we didn't get the whole slide. Anyway, Mackenzie said, I think if someone has something to say that is upsetting, they shouldn't say anything at all. I think that because if you do say something that is upsetting to someone, it will hurt their feelings. It will be unfair to the person you're speaking to. Also, you speak the way you want to be spoken to. You should be respectful to each other. This is one student in New York. And then I think we actually changed the slide on the subway, and we lost the other slide. It's right there, I think. So, and then Naomi, I'll just bring up this one real quick. Naomi said, yes, I think that people should have the right to say what they want, even if it's upsetting to others, because you don't know if the person is right or wrong, and you don't know what the person got to say is important or not. You should listen to what the person got to say, and everyone has opinions, and they should have the freedom of speech, right? So students from, this is one students from Europe, one students from New York. Students are disagreeing and hopefully putting, and as you'll see in a second, students are starting to put it into cultural context, which is pretty exciting. So students are seeing perspectives, not just from their 20 to 25 to 30, or if you're in Arizona, 40 students in your class. They're actually getting perspectives from a global audience and able to, start to see the mindsets and thoughts of other people across the world.
And when they encounter those different perspectives, they learn how to agree and disagree respectively. This is a letter to President Barack Obama, and this is a letter to Mitt Romney. We're doing an election project, so kids around the world, my class will do it on Monday, are looking up the issues, are writing to the candidates that they hope are elected, and actually there are several elections going on around the globe, so it's not all America. But these two kids from the same class, actually, posted their letters, and then kids around the world are commenting on it. So they're learning how to encounter others and how to frame their arguments in respectful and productive ways.
Are these both the same grade level?
Yeah, they're both third grade. This one learned her sequencing words first, second, and she had a last. It's funny, they're all really concerned about school lunch and extending recess, but they put it into a political frame.
Because that's what you care about when you're in third grade.
The ramen batteries from nachos.
Yeah, the ramen supporters are like, we know Michelle wants us to have only 700 calories, but we really need more at lunch.
That's like a real letter. It's not this one. But like literally, they're like, Miss Obama wants 700 calories, and we're hungry after school. So I want my parents to vote for you, Mr. Romney.
But all my students are saying that Mitt Romney killed Big Bird, so they want Barack Obama. So it's kid version, but they're concerned about political issues. They're also using literacy in an effective and authentic way, so they're practicing language, and if some of them are English language learners or doing language programs, this is an incredible way for them to just, use that language for a purpose that goes beyond a worksheet.
And a lot of teachers are having their students actually send their letters, so it goes onto the network. We're holding a competition to give an incentive so that teachers will post it and create that global dialogue. But it's actually the best part of this, I think, is that they're getting to send it and feel part of the political process as well. Another thing that United Classrooms does is it actually helps students position themselves in the world. I know as an American, like we're terrible at geography in this country, and I think worse than anyone. And I what I really like about United Classrooms is that like when you go to, this is a real class, like when you go to another classroom, you actually see like where they are, and like you can play with that map and start to think, oh my goodness, where is India? That's all the way there. I'm here. That's the beginnings of like your early geography skills, and I think that's really important. And not only that, but when you're building authentic relationships with another place, with the kids from another place, you actually care about where they are instead of just like memorizing on a map. I think that's actually a better way of learning geography personally. And then also, when you know that there are things out there, you expand your sense of possibility. You start to think as like, as a low-income American, like. A lot of students aren't thinking, oh, I can go to India someday. Oh, I could, help out some students in Haiti who were affected by the earthquake there. Oh, I could, go to college in New York. These aren't, so we're hoping that, through some of these features, students are expanding their sense of possibility and saying, I can go places.
And a good example of that is that after Hurricane Sandy, kids started communicating on United Classrooms, so we put up a question asking them if they had any thoughts or experiences, and kids started to share what was happening to them, and other kids started to share their concern. A kid said Hurricane Sandy was a nightmare to New York, and another one said not much, but yes, because a big branch fell on the emergency ladder and it was about to break the window. Was it scary for you? This is a conversation that kids are having across borders that they wouldn't otherwise be able to have. This kid provided a lot of incredible facts. They obviously watched the news. And so their sources of information become other kids, which is really incredible because that breaks the boundaries of stereotypes and also adult-centered, and like instead of National Geographic, they're reading other kids' experiences of here and now events. And so kids are starting to feel like they can act as members of the global community.
And something that you actually don't see here is that there were a number of students and teachers who actually posted on this forum and said, how can we help? Like, we'd love to, like send something. If there's anything we do, we wish you, health and well-being. And it was just a place where people could go and express themselves, and that's an important thing to be a global citizen and part of a global community. So where are all these things happening? So just to see, like, these are some real classrooms who are using United Classrooms. So like we were saying before, when you join our network or when you start to interact on Skype, who's doing Skype in the classroom? Skype in the classroom is actually really cool too. You actually start to say, okay, so this is one of Leah's students in New York. He's not just like thinking about the students in his local community in the Bronx. He's able to think, about the perspectives of kids in Lima who are using United Classrooms, or a classroom in Denmark, and classrooms in Colorado, who hold different perspectives, come from different communities, and come from different cultures. And when it comes to like, someone earlier was saying like they really believe, I think it was you, Kayla, you were saying like you really like you care about people maintaining their like cultural identities. And something that we see through this is that when you're actually able to like project your identity, it's not like you just like it like dilutes your culture. It actually becomes stronger and more more prideful in like who you are and what you are. Being from New Hampshire, I feel that every day when I'm in another state that makes me wear a seatbelt. Anyway, go ahead.
So we just have some testimonials from some teachers that are using it. This is Kenneth in the U.S. and we have Rike in Denmark, and they're saying that Kenneth says that UClass offered me the perfect gateway to connect my scholars to other students around the world by using the tool that would increase their communication skills while making them technologically savvy in the process. And you were talking about that as your English language learners are gaining language capabilities. They're also learning this tool that we need in the 21st century to be successful and competitive, which is technology skills.
Which is, by the way, huge, like, when you talk about the achievement gap, that's, I think, a huge part of it. When kids aren't able to type when they're, like, high schoolers, or, like, how are they going to succeed? Or how are they going to be able to, like, keep the pace with their peers in college? Yeah.
And when they can see the other kids, when my students were like, the kids in 3rd grade in New Hampshire know how to push shift and make a capital letter. I need to learn that. Instead of me just pushing it on them, it increases the competition for authentic reasons. And Enrique says that my classes use UClass both to handle homework, to collect different projects. We work on English class, in an English class, and also to connect with other classes globally. The world's getting smaller and the possibilities on the internet expand. We don't know what exact skills students will need for the future, but we know that they're going to communicate more with other people, and that's true, and that's what we're all asking. Like, there's no hard answer for how to prepare kids for a future that we haven't experienced yet, but we know that other humans will be there, we know that technology will be there, and we know that they need to be a part of this global community, so we need to make sure we're preparing them.
How do they communicate in English?
It's all translatable,
So let's
Zach will
actually-
take you on.
Okay.
So it's all translatable, so kids are communicating in multiple languages and then just translating. Yeah.
So
There are probably some dialects that are not represented, unfortunately, but whatever Google Translator has, we have.
is this? Are we on? We were on.
Oh, well,
there we
he's
go.
figuring that
Okay,
out. We can field some questions.
So, you guys quickly just want to see it, and then we can go into the questions. Does that sound good? Just so you guys have an understanding of what we're doing, and then we can take the conversation wherever you guys want to go, and we can just create a dialogue. So you can log in as a student, teacher, or parent into your page. Everyone has different settings. Parents can only see their class page. One of the reasons we did this is because at the beginning, like, teachers might not feel that excited about becoming a global community, so they're not going to go on every day. But if we create like intra-classroom communication, then it will like encourage teachers to sign up, and then they can become part of the global dialogue. So we added that. So Leah, that's you, right?
Mhm.
And then we're just going to log you into Leah's class. And so this is a classroom profile page. It's very simple. It's like a simple like social media, Facebook style format. Every class has their own profile. No one has their individual profile, though we might do like some individual features. But everyone has their own inbox. So like when you go on, this is your inbox. When you type, it's your name. When you go and send a message, it's from you. So it's kind of like Blackboard, I guess, in that way. And then, would you like to go through?
So I post my homework so that the parents who do have technological capabilities at home, and that's not all of them, can, have a no excuses homework policy. It's fascinating to my students even just to see the time zones. Like they go on to another page and they're like, what? They're sleeping. That just blows their mind. There's a picture of our school. I can post discussion directed questions for my students, so I can if Zach asks a provocative question right now, my students can go on and extend their learning individually by responding to this, and then they have these little arguments. Cool, I disagree right on the site, and then the Blue or the World post. So every week we have these current event relevant questions that are really really motivating for our students.
So these are like
I think it's really bad storm.
Yeah. So these are real conversations across America and the world.
Then we have projects, which is one of my favorite features. So things that we do in our classroom, we can display for the rest of the world. There's our trip to the grocery store. There's our election project. We did global passports, so my students can know that everything that they're learning is displayed for the rest of the network and get feedback from other kids. They also have their own inboxes, so this facilitates our pen pal relationship. We have pen pals in New Hampshire, and my students communicate with them about what they're learning. They send them messages. When we explore the network, we can see all of the global participants, where they're from.
So you can see there are quite a few American classrooms. That must be a new class, which is signed up. But
And then we go to one of their pages, we see the map of where they're located.
So here's a pretty active classroom. You can see like their projects. You can see where they are. You can
see who they are.
You can message their students. You can create pen pal relationships and interact. And students can actually interact on their discussion boards if they've posted for the world. So there's like the in classroom communication as well as the inter-classroom communication. So it's
amazing.
Sorry, thanks for sharing that. I'm just sort of thinking legally. How do you post children's pictures? Do you guys have to deal with that?
So we leave it up to the teachers.
Okay.
First of all, every teacher has to be authenticated before they have access to other classrooms. So like this bar is actually not there when a teacher logs in for the first time. So then we authenticate them using a number of methods. And once they're authenticated, they can start to explore and like create pen pals. Like we were saying, like you can explore and you can actually see which classrooms are looking for pen pals. So like. So that's like an easy way to like find pen pals.
But the whole site is COPPA compliant, and parent logins are restricted, so parents can't see all things. So it's just teachers and students that can really navigate and participate in the website. And our privacy policy links up with the school's privacy disclosure statement. So some teachers don't put their students' faces on, and others do because they each have their own rules. It's interesting to work with global laws.
You guys have a good law team behind you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's honestly been we had to lay a pretty secure infrastructure, but since then it's been pretty, people, unless we get a creep on there, we've done a pretty good job so far to make sure to weed that out and
I have two questions, like how do you fund it, like where do you get, and how do they hear about you?
Well, you guys need to tell everyone, all right? So it's up to you. It's totally free. We're honestly a mission-based organization. We're competing though with like some other organizations that don't connect across the world, that are mostly like insular, like Edmodo would be the example, like they would be our competition. And so we are like technically, we're probably gonna be like somewhere, eventually we'll probably be like a B Corp, and it's like a benefit corporation basically, which will be like a cross-section between for-profit and non-profit. But anyway, long story short is that we're running on like small investment funds right now, and I'm like, not making anything, but in the long term we will fund it just like a lot of other technology startups, as if we'll scale large enough hopefully that eventually we'll either do like some sort of upsell for parents so that they'll be able to like get more functionality, or we'll put educational games on the site where kids can connect, and that might cost something. So we're trying to create like the basic format will always be free, and maybe we'll sell data if we have a large enough global audience that we can do so. We're being very creative about how we'll monetize it. Right now there is no monetization. It's completely free. So.
My question is how far you can reach to kids. So my concern is you use technology to reach out to children. So only those who have access to technology can benefit from a website. But I mean, in China, there are millions of children who cannot afford school, let alone technology. And also in the US, I don't think everyone have access to technology. So how can we reach out to those group of children? I mean, they're also part of global community. And my opinion is, I mean, kids from rich families need to know how those poor kids live.
So that's the inherent issue with this. We're not pretending, first of all, that there are a couple things, because I studied development and I've worked in like very small villages in Africa, and I don't want to pretend like it's the right thing to just go into storm into a village and just like throw computers, into a setting that might not be ready. I also, or not just might be ready, but just might, I think that's a very delicate thing to like, it's just a very delicate subject. Personally, I feel that way. I don't know how you guys feel about that. But I just want to finish. So we're taking care of what we want to do is for wired classrooms that do have technology. We want to provide this, and other organizations that feel compelled to bring technology to places. And as the world becomes more and more wired, which it is, and especially like like there are like some projections that like by 2015, basically everyone in the continent of Africa will have access to the internet through a mobile device. And so that's not like that is a concern, I think, but I think it is a delicate issue that we're not trying to necessarily solve.
But economic diversity is represented within the site. Even like my students are coming from Hunts Point in the Bronx from low-income families, and they're communicating with kids in a private school. And I think that the beginning of that dialogue is happening. And you're right, it goes further on either end, and that's another question. But our goal in making it free is to allow all schools that are wired to leverage technology in this way.
Yeah, even though there are, I mean, not everybody has that access and have the technology, but still we have a lot of people who have that access, and we can use it for you can approach that what already we have and bring it there. Maybe we can talk about how can you talk with the students in another word who don't have the technology access, they can maybe bring out the idea that okay, then how can I help them? You know, how can I connect? How can I expand the technology or access to other people? So I think maybe we can. It's a good. Anyway, we have a lot of number of students who has the access. So you know, why not we start from there? That's my idea.
And I think we are kind of like, you know, at the crest of a wave, so to speak. Like I think that there is an ed tech movement happening, and there's a reason for that. We didn't even know when we started. Honestly, this kind of fell in our laps. We didn't even know like about the startup scene when we moved to New York, but from Tanzania. But I think that you can see in classrooms that technology is being integrated more and more, and there is actually the technology to do this in most American schools, at least, and most developed schools. Yeah.
I might add that maybe eventually technology will allow you to educate outside of the classroom and the importance of that. Because, like you were getting at in your illustration, this two-way dialogue, this boxed version of learning is really old hat. It came out of a factory model. It makes no sense. It's something we need devices and things to get us away from this restricted, very closed off style of learning. So in two cents, to piggyback on what Sook said, I agree. It's about informing other people, making awareness about the people who don't have technology, and whether they need it or not is a much bigger question. And then I would say that second part is just making an awareness of what education means. It's not a box. It means a lot of things. And
absolutely.
You know, some people's education has nothing to do with me speaking. It has everything with me putting you on the horse and making you ride.
Yeah.
You know, so, and you can't do that in the classroom. So,
I think something that I'm pretty convicted about is that you need to prepare someone for the environment that their family and they want to move into. And I know from my experiences, I actually, like, we're not very technological people. Like, I much more value, like, this conversation eye to eye in a forum. I don't even own an iPhone, actually, or a smartphone, but I'm like the last man standing in New York. And so for me, like, given my experiences, and this is a personal opinion, like, I don't necessarily think that, everybody's experience necessitates, like, global citizenship, actually. I'm not saying, like, our mission is not every student in the world should be global citizens, but students who are going to enter the global marketplace, which are now the majority of Americans and most, people who are living in developed countries and developing countries, actually, will need this type of education to succeed and be productive members of society. And because they will also, because of their carbon footprint and other reasons, affect others in a deeper way, they should be developing these skills. That's the mindset that we have as an organization.
Yeah.
What's the incentive for students to communicate with the students in other classes or other countries?
They're pretty intrinsically motivated to do it. It's funny, it's been harder to get teachers to incorporate it and break their patterns. Kids, as soon as my kids make me use it. We haven't gone on United Classroom for a while. Like, they love communicating with other people, and they're super curious, and it feels like a really fun way to learn, to get to use technology. So far we haven't had to incentivize children beyond the reward of the relationship and the experience. Would you add to that?
I would just say that I think we have had to make some pivots. One is that if you notice on here, like, it says local businesses sponsor. We had thought about that earlier. We haven't changed that picture yet. Just know that that's actually not happening. And you can see on the site it's no longer there. But another pivot that we'll probably make in our development is that we will allow for more personalized features eventually, so that students do feel that, like, they can access more of the individual when they interact. But we also like the community model, especially given, like, our experiences as teachers, that we think the community model works better for a classroom. So I think that, like you were saying, it's social. It's social. It's fun. Like. And by the way, like, it's not so bad if if students are having a social conversation with people, even in their own class, but across the world, because you learn something when you make a relationship with someone. I mean, that's just plain and simple. I
Just
think.
a little commenting, like I think it's very important what you have highlighted. Like we don't have to aim everyone will become like global citizens, but what is really important is having this mentality, having the mindset to understand others, to adjust ourselves. So like I don't think we just have such aim, but I think we should have an aim to change this mindset to not just like to compete, which country is going to compete in the next 20 years with whom, but how we can conquer it.
Yeah.
I think this is very important to have the mentality.
I want to say that also applies to teachers. I think that teachers, so many teachers using this tool are engaging in things like this with their students, are learning just as much as their students are about what works and what doesn't work, how to have respectful conversations, what's going on out there. Like, adults need this education just as much as kids.
And a little example I want to give from my research, like also, also we're talking about like we should teach them math and because they will get tests and whatever. But also teachers were emphasizing you can teach kids when you are teaching mathematics, for example, and you can teach them, oh, do you know where the mathematics is coming? It's not coming just from Finland, or it's not coming from US, like it's also coming and talk about where it comes from, and it's like contribution of many different civilizations and countries.
Yes.
So that's what they were doing when they were teaching math.
And we think that there are a number of math teachers on here, and we haven't yet seen that network ripen, but we think that unfortunately the way I was taught math was not in a very inquiry-based way, in a way that was like, oh, you can do a math problem this way, and guess what, let's try it this way, and I think that like this, there's a lot of potential for students to share how they do problems across the world, so that students can like see more and more ways of solving. One other thing, we're all in education here, like these are like our, like when I think about what we're doing, I get excited because these are their developmental years, and like if you're going to promote understanding during any time of life, it should be, I think, during developmental years when students individuals can absorb and develop these key characteristics like understanding and like just critical thinking skills that include other perspectives. And I think that like eventually, like by creating this interconnectedness and not just making it competitive, like that's a means, hopefully, to like global citizenship is a means to world peace. And I think that's what Ban Ki-moon's saying. And I think that's the reason why we're here.
Do you provide trainings for classroom teachers to implement the project? Like do they have like training workshops for like teachers in America and then teachers in China, India? Do you guys have, like,
we're moving. I mean, we're brand new. I mean, to be honest, we have like
no, at least on the agenda.
Oh, on the agenda, yes. I'm just letting you know. Like we're like yes. I visited classrooms throughout the West. If anyone knows someone who wants to hire 5 people to help us train, we really believe in this, and we obviously want to see this expand. But it's we have 2 people working full time for us. Leah's in the classroom.
But we've offered webinars and tried to make ourselves as accessible as possible, but the plane ticket to China hasn't quite materialized. Yes.
Just not yet. We
did
did
a translator.
Yeah.
Then how do you market this website internationally?
So far we've tried to be like pretty strategic. We launched, like I said, through mostly Teach for All and Teach for America teachers, and so that has, and then we're like, every time we have an international sign up, we'll call and ask like about different avenues to work in that country to try and adapt it to their model of education, and then the online we try to create a pretty big online presence, and we're trying to reach out to international schools as the next audience because they're naturally interconnected. But again, any help with any networks that you have, we'd love.
How fast did this platform expand internationally as of now, or until now?
So we launched in August.
When did we hit every continent?
Yeah.
This August?
Yeah, we launched in August.
Okay, it seems like for a while. Sorry.
No, we're very new.
Hey, wait, did you say it's 40,000 users? 4,000.
But still, it's
That's
such a
incredible.
big network. Exactly, it's incredible.
4,000 users means 4,000.
Oh yeah, so sorry. That means we say that it's students.
Okay.
Yeah,
How
including
many
students.
classrooms have you got?
So we have, I should know this, over 300.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and how many countries represented?
Over 30. Yeah.
It's 3
Okay.
months.
In 3 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing.
So
Amazing.
thank you. That's nice to It doesn't feel amazing sometimes.
What are we doing wrong?
I know. You know, this week was because of the hurricane. It was actually a pretty slow week for the network, slower than usual because we do have a lot of users on the eastern seaboard. But it was actually one of the most moving weeks because for us, like, that was why we're doing this. Kids on their own, if they weren't in class, or kids across the world because they knew about this, were answering that question, and we just thought that was like it, you know? That was it. It was like there were people who were like sharing their concerns and expressing their feelings about something that's serious, you know, and that really affected them. And that was like one of the first times I was like, okay, I think we're doing something, you know. So thank you so much, guys.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. So we will have a very short break, less than 5 minutes. Would it be okay? And we'll come back and Sam will, less than 5 minutes.
Oh, guys, our email, if you're interested, I'm Zach, so it's just zach@uclass.org.
Isn't it on here? Oh, it's Unite. There's one on here that will work too.
Yeah, that's basically my personal email too.